What's up, guys? Rick from DFS On Demand here with your one and done preview for this week's Players Championship. Remember, this is a one and done preview. If you'd like to go listen to me go through the field in a more DraftKings centric or fantasy centric way, I'll link that video below or at the top of the video if you're watching on YouTube. So go check that out. But this is for one and done pools for this week. So let's jump into it. All right, it is Players Championship week. A lot to go over, so I don't want to waste too much time here. But what I did do for this week is I added a new section of this tool that is available on DFSOnDemand.com. You can click the the golfer's usage. So if you click on that, obviously I need to fix the formatting a bit, but it'll show you who has already been picked and how many participants, how many entries have already picked these golfers. So the way to read this is Hideki Matsuyama has already been picked 1,402 times, which means 48% of the field has already used Sungjae. This will become much more important as we get later in the season to see how many have Rahm, how many have DJ, how many have Rory, so that you can kind of pivot just a little bit, bob and weave and zig and zag and all that good stuff based on your picks. So just to rattle off the highest owned golfers, or the golfers that have been used the most, Hideki far and away the most used, because we went through waste management. We went through the beginning of the year where Hideki gets used quite a bit. He's been used 48% of the time. Sungjae has been used 37%. Bubba has been used 33%, and Jon Rahm has been used 32% of the time. DJ, Dustin Johnson, and Rory McIlroy are next on that list, and there are 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 golfers who have been used by at least 30% of the field. If you want access to this tool, it is part of the DFS On Demand subscription, or I've actually carved it out. You can get just access to the one and done tool for $9 a year. Great little deal that you can get there. So anyway, that's what we're looking at. Helpful for this week, but will become even more helpful in future weeks. So let's go look at this field, because this is the number one prize pool on tour. The Players Championship, $12.5 million purse, meaning that if you're going to burn one of your studs, now would be the time to do it. Now, looking back at the most popular golfers from last year, Tiger Woods was picked 318 times. That was the most. So quite frankly, already what we're seeing with 318 being the highest owned golfer, the ownership gets pretty spread out here, because there's so many big names that you really don't need to it's not like a clear cut, Hideki at Waste Management, for example. That's not happening here. So Tiger Woods, 318 picks last year, obviously will not be getting or at least shouldn't be getting any ownership this year, because he is not playing. Then Xander Schauffele was next at 273. Brooks Koepka at 261. Tommy Fleetwood at 257. So there were, 11 golfers that were picked more than 100 times each. That's a pretty significant number. It's probably no surprise that in the biggest prize pool, the guys that I have with the highest expected value are Rory, Justin Thomas, and Brooks Koepka. Now, I am using the full, all of the stats from 2017. If I were to be that helps out Brooks, it helps out DJ, because the results recently haven't been as good. If I close the gap a little bit and just kind of look at the last couple of months, Rory's numbers get even better because he's been so good recently. Justin Thomas gets even better. Brooks is still okay. And then you see guys that jump up like a Webb Simpson or a Patrick Reed, even a Henrik Stenson. So you can decide what this range you want to be is. But let's talk about some of these golfers on a more individual basis. But actually, before we do that, let's see who the winner had last year. So the guy who eventually won the 2019 one and done pool last year did have Rory, of course. So this is one of the few times that the winner had a chalky pick, because as long as you can get yourself the $2 million, it's well worth the chalk. So usually what we've seen, and you'll see it, in previous weeks, Rarely did last year's winner pick someone who was owned, more than 200 times. He was almost always on the left side of this red line. So that's what we're looking at here. But this is the 1 week where he got very close to that, got a pretty highly owned golfer, but was able to get the victory out of it, which goes to show you that, the $2.2 million or whatever the first prize is well worth being chalky this week. Rory McIlroy, who is one of the 8 golfers who has been picked by at least 30% of the field, if he is still available to you, very obviously a good play. I don't think I have to really go into that much more. He's rattling off top 5s. He's your defending champion here. Even when he seemingly has a bad week, he still finishes in the top 5. And historically, yeah, he was picked, 180 times last year, 182 times for the Players' Championship. This is not generally a spot where people use him. 495 times at the Masters last year, 445 at the Arnold Palmer, 332 at the Open Championship. Those were the big ones. The Players' Championship probably ranked 6th for Rory for the tournaments that he was highest owned in. So hard to argue that he would be a bad pick for this week. Jon Rahm, who probably should have won this event last year, before he goes and hits one into the water on 11, and kind of punts this thing away. You can see all of his ownership for last year was really front loaded. The first event of the year, or his first event of the year, he was picked 621 times. That's the Desert Classic. Now it's called the American Express. Then he was highly owned at the Farmers, highly owned at Waste Management, and then highly owned at WGC Mexico. Other than that, flew pretty much under the radar, and he's already been chosen, what is this? 300, 550, 950 times, a little bit more than that this year. So would not mind a Rahm play this week, as long as you're not saving him for another major, which I don't think you should be. You should probably be burning Rahm at this point. And then I'll show you JT really quickly and see where he was normally owned. He's very popular in majors as well. Wow. Okay. So super highly owned at the Sony. Now the problem is, so he was picked 846 times for the Sony Open last year, and then 339 times for the WGC Mexico. The problem is he has not come anywhere close to that this year. His ownership at the Sony was cut in, by a fraction. He was only picked 127 times for the Sony Open this year, and only 168 for the WGC Mexico, which makes me believe that a lot of the industry, or a lot of these owners, have been saving Justin Thomas for a bigger event, and none are bigger than this week. So I imagine he is going to be deployed quite a bit for the Players' Championship. Let's go through these pretty quickly here. Let's look at Webb, because Webb Simpson, I think, will be fairly popular, as he should be. Although, let's see here. Actually, maybe I'm wrong on this. So only 12 picks at the Players' Championship last year. I would find that pretty hard to believe, but the ownership of Webb Simpson is dictated by 5 events a year. Wyndham, RBC Canadian, Valspar, Honda, and Waste Management were the 5 times last year he was picked over 200 times. He's already been used 319 at the Sony. He's already been used 346 at the Waste Management. If for whatever reason we believe that maybe Webb flies a bit under the radar, maybe with all the big names in the field, he just gets overlooked. If he was anywhere under 100 picks for this year, I would be thrilled to roster him. He is in the midst of his best season ever on the PGA Tour. He is obviously a great course fit for TPC Sawgrass, where he has won. He doesn't have worse than a T16 in the last 3 years. Like this to me, if I knew his ownership was going to be this low, I would be running him out there in every single one of my one and dones. And then the guy that I've just been kind of beating the drum for all week is Bryson here, who heavily used at the Arnold Palmer, 389 picks, which was kind of predictable because he was used very heavily there last year. We're entering the time of year where at least for last year, Bryson was not chosen all that much. I think it's going to be different this year. So there was a 8 stretch span in the middle, starting now at the Players and running to the U.S. Open for Bryson last year, where he was not picked more than 143 times. And in fact, he was only picked more than 74 times once. So this is kind of a dead season historically for Bryson. But I don't think that's going to be the case this year. He's playing much better. I think you can now you could consider him in major championships. You can consider him in WGCs, and I think you can consider him here. The biggest prize pool of the year as he continues to break the game with his off the tee numbers, and he continues to put up results. I would be very excited to use him in one and done this week. I understand saving him for maybe the Masters or something like that, or a WGC event, but this feels like a pretty good spot to use Bryson as well. If you wanted to be really sneaky, you could probably use Rickie Fowler here. So here's Rickie. Obviously not having all that great of a year. Has been struggling since the American Express, where he faded on the weekend, but he was showing signs of life last week at the Arnold Palmer, putting a couple of rounds together. Obviously, he has won here in the past. He won here in 16 or 15. That is interesting. I think he's starting to click, and I don't think anybody's going to own him. He's owned 55 times at the Arnold Palmer. While he played well, he didn't do anything that would really scream run and go grab Rickie. And, he's one of the few guys that is fairly popular every single week. He gets picked 100 or more times last year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 different times. So that is probably one of the most consistently spread out ownership. So I don't think you're ever in risk of getting Rickie with 500 other people, not even at Waste Management. He only had 182 picks there. Not even at Honda, 263 there. He's just never going to get over like 300, and especially now with the way he's coming in, like I think this could be a pretty sneaky place to use him for your one and done pool. So I think that'll basically do it. For me this week, I'm trying to get obviously as much money as possible. It is the largest prize pool of the year, but I don't really think I want to be on the same guy. I don't want to be on the guy that's 400 owned 400 times, right? I want to be on the guy that's owned like 150 times, 200 times, who has legitimate win equity, which all of the guys that I named, I believe do. I think, probably in a vacuum, the best play is probably Jon Rahm. For where you can use him otherwise, for how he has historically been owned, he's probably the best play. I don't mind using Rory, but you can use Rory anywhere. I love Bryson this week. It might be a little bit of a stretch to use him here as opposed to, someone like a Rory or someone like a Rahm. If I knew what Webb Simpson, if I knew I could get Webb under 100 or even under 50 picks, I would probably go for that. But like that, it kind of depends on the situation that you're in. If you're front running, go grab Rory, go grab Rahm, go grab one of those guys. If you're trying to make up ground, someone like a Rickie, someone like a Hideki might be a better use of your pick. All right, let me know who you're going to play at RickRunGood on Twitter, or leave a comment below. Talk to you guys soon. Best of luck this week.